Hi, my dear friends. In the last class, we understood by discussing elaboratively the concept of Schedule 2, namely, what is supply of goods, what is supply of services in different scenarios we come across. Section 7, subsection 1, clause C says that activities even without consideration is a supply. Schedule 1 transaction. Section 7, subsection 1, capital A, which speaks that transaction as specified in Schedule 2, what is supply of goods, what is supply of services, in case where there is an ambiguity in application, we come across by discussing Schedule 2 in the last class. Now referring to you, my dear friends, today section 7 subsection 2 supply here excludes. Section 7 subsection 2 speaks that in the given case supply, on the top we refer supply excludes, referring here activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3. Which transactions covered under Schedule 3 means the transactions which are excluded from the scope of supply, meaning thereby question of payment of GST thereon does not arise. Very important list it is from the exam point of view, my dear friends. So taking that into account, presenting now Schedule 3 transactions one by one are as follows. There are 8 points are there, my dear. Referring to you now Schedule 3 transactions. Schedule 3, what are they? They are as follows, one by one I am presenting here. Yes. If you refer here, my dear friends, activities specified in Schedule 3 also be called as negative list under the GST. Presenting here one by one. First and foremost, services by an employee to the employer in the course or in relation to his employment. In relation to an employment, employee provides his services to the employer which does not attract GST at all. How to understand this? With the help of example, my dear friends. Here example as follows. Presenting in front of you, hopefully you answer this. Here Mr. Raj employee of Vikram Enterprises. Now, he provides these services, my dear friends. Supplied services to whom means to an associate enterprise of Vikram Enterprises, for which they paid fees to them. This Vikram Enterprises paid rupees 2 lakh. Now tell me, my dear friends, in the given case, if you refer in the given case, who provide this service to whom? The Mr. Raj supplied. Recipient here is an associate enterprise of Vikram Enterprises. Mr. Raj, where is his employment? In Vikram Enterprises. As long as Raj provides the services to Vikram Enterprises, employee-employer relationship will cover under the Schedule 3, thereby not attract GST. Got the clarity? On the other hand, if Raj provides the services to an associate enterprise of his employer, that means not to his employer, resulting that the supply made by Mr. Raj to an associate enterprise of Vikram Enterprises is covered under this transaction of supply. Supply includes Mr. Raj, since supplied services to an associate enterprise of Vikram Enterprises, it is supply, not covered under Schedule 3, not covered under Schedule 3. Got the clarity, my dear friends? In the given case, you have to identify in the following manner. Since supplied services to an associate enterprise of Vikram Enterprises, it is supplied, not covered in Schedule 3, because Raj not provide these services to his employer. His employer associate enterprise, a different company. Further, my dear friends, when employee-employer relationship will come into picture means, example, Mr. A, employee of Mrs. A Limited, services provided as per employment contract to whom? To Mrs. A Limited, who is employer. Here he is an employee. It is service provided by employee to an employer in the course of his employment. Therefore, supply of services of Mr. A covered under Schedule 3, that is supply excludes. Got the clarity, my dear friends? Supply excludes. Further, my dear sir, I too given here certain examples. Look here, this will give the clarity for your kind consideration. Employee provide these services to the employer in the course of employment. Yes sir, not a supply because covered under Schedule 3. If you say no, not in the course of employment, then is it for consideration? Yes sir, in that case covered under Section 7 Section 1 Clause A. If not for consideration, it covered under Section 7 1C. Read with Schedule 1 point number 2. Other than gift not exceeding rupees 50,000 in a financial year. So like that transaction took place. For consideration, 7(1)(a), sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, lease, rental or disposal, they will cover. For no consideration, Schedule 1 point number 2, Schedule 1 point number 2, supply of goods or services are both between related parties. Related parties include employee provide these services to employer. Related parties transaction where are the employer provide these services, employer given the gift to an employee. If it is not exceed rupees 50,000 in a financial year, not a supply. Other than that is a supply. So like that we can able to analyze it. Repeating again, services provided in the course of employment, not for consideration. In that case, employer related parties, therefore Schedule 1 will apply. Point number 2, accordingly is a supply. Accordingly it is a supply, my dear friends. Got the clarity, my dear? Further referring from here, very important circular it is. Very important circular it is, my dear friends. Remuneration paid to director. Independent director, nominee director cannot be employee of the company as per the Section 149 subsection 6 of the Companies Act 2013. Independent director is not employee of the company, is not an employee of the company. Therefore, whatever supply of service provided by independent director cannot be called as in the course of employment. As long as it is not in the course of employment, so long is taxable. If taxable, it is applicable RCM, reverse charge mechanism applicable, because the director provides the services to the company where he has directorship, not in the course of employment, specifically covered by a notification under reverse charge. Reverse charge mechanism will apply. Recipient here is corporate company. Recipient only liable to pay GST. On the other hand, other than independent directors, or maybe whole-time director, maybe women director, maybe what we can call it as the part-time director, like that, their remuneration paid to the director is subject to TDS under section 192 of the CGST. Yes sir, it is employment, therefore not taxable under GST, covered under schedule 3, therefore outside the scope of GST. If it is not covered under 192 but covered under TDS section 194J, namely TDS provision applicable for the profession, in that case, not in the course of employment, resulting that it is attract GST on reverse charge, because supplier of service here is a director of the company. Then how to understand this? With the help of example, I am now going to present in front of you, is as follows, my dear friends. With one example, referring here, my dear sir, here Mr. Shavani, who is managing director of Mrs. Shavani Limited. Here he provides the services. Sitting fee rupees 2 lakh charged from Mrs. Shavani Limited, in which Shavani is a managing director. Sitting fees not going to cover under section 192 to raise the TDS, not in the course of employment, not in the course of employment. Are you getting my point, sir? In that case, it is section 194 J as a profession. Otherwise, I can say that this sitting fee is going to be taxed under the income from other sources, not under the head salary in the hands of Mr. Shavani, resulting that this supply made by him, he is a supplier, they are the recipient, company recipient. Who is liable to pay GST here means it is a supply. Here I will say that it is a supply. Reverse charge mechanism is apply. Therefore, GST is liable to pay. GST is liable to pay by Mrs. Shavani Limited. So, if director of the company provide these services in the course of employment, which is going to be attract the TDS under section 192 of Income Tax Act 1961, then there is no question of liability of the GST on such transaction. It is in the course of his employment, resulting that covered under Schedule 3. Therefore, supply excludes the transaction supplied by director in the course of employment to the employer. Now, in the given case, let us analyze and answer, my dear friends. In the given case, let us say Mr. C, CFO of Mrs. Info Limited, Mr. C, CFO of Mrs. Info Limited supplied services not in the course of employment to Mrs. Info Limited. Is it supply? Not in the course of employment. They said not in the course of employment. In that case, it is supply. Supply includes it is. So who liable to pay GST? You feel the Info Limited recipient liable to pay GST? Absolutely not. Mr. C being a supplier is liable to pay GST, if any, which is forward charge, not a reverse charge. Why? Note, Mr. C is not a, she is not a director of the Mrs. Info Limited. That is the reason. He is not a director, Amma. If he is a director, then you can think of who is not a director. So RCM is applicable only when being a director of the company provide these services to the company not in the course of employment. Then it is called as supply. RCM will apply. Here he is not a director, no. He is only a particular, what we can call only a particular CF. Who is the director? Therefore, if and if forward charge, not reverse charge. Now come back. First point we referred, employee provide the services to the employer in the course or his employment, not attract the GST. It is covered under Schedule 3. Supply includes this transaction. So whatever points, transactions covered under Schedule 3, that will be the outside the scope of the GST law. Next point number 2. Under the Schedule 3. Under the Schedule 3. Furthermore point number 2. Services by court or tribunal established under any law for the time being in force. I will tell you, my dear friends. When you appeal to the appellate authority for the want of justice, appeal chapter available at final level, for the time being you just relax and listen. Mr. A, registered person under GST, he wanted to appeal. He wanted to appeal to the appellate authority. Say, let us say, appeal to GST AT, Appellate Tribunal, Goods and Services Tax Appellate Tribunal, GST AT. Here, fee of rupees 25,000 paid to Appellate Tribunal, to Appellate Tribunal. To Appellate Tribunal. What for they paid is application fees. Application fees to hear the case for further hearing purpose. Once you made an application, there must be charges, application fees, which is rupees 25 rupees you paid to tribunal. Does not mean that you have been paid to tribunal some money to get verdict in your favor. It is not so. In the given case, it is not so. Here, your application for hearing, if you wanted to qualify, you have to pay application fees. The fee payable to a court or tribunal does not come under the category of supply, which includes further also. I will say that here, not a supply. Not a supply. Not a supply. Further, on the other hand, furthermore, one more point here, not a supply cases, CBIC clarification is given. CBIC clarification. In the case of consumer dispute, redressal commission, fee paid, application fee, paid to consumer dispute redressal commission, paid to Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Here is a supply, a question mark. Here Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission is also a judiciary, therefore not a supply. It is not a supply. Got the clarity, my dear friends? So far we referred 2 points. One is called what? Employee provide the services to his employer in the course or in relation to his employment. Second one, I refer by saying that fee payable to a court or tribunal, which includes fee payable to a consumer dispute redressal commission. Further, my dear friends, point number 3, negative list, point number 3. The functions performed by the members of the parliament, members of the state legislatures, members of the panchayats, members of the municipalities and members of other local authorities, then it is not attract GST at all. Functions performed by the members of the parliament, members of the state legislative assembly like MLAs, MPs, members of panchayat like councillors, members of municipalities and members of other local authorities. If they provide the services in their capacity, which is not attract GST, which is not a supply. Point number B. In the point number B, the duties performed by any person who holds any post in pursuance of the provisions of the Constitution in that capacity. Examples we have here. We have examples here. Look here, my dear friends. Members of parliament, state legislative assembly, municipality and local authorities, not supply. Further, any person who holds any post in pursuance of the provisions of the Constitution in that capacity, like members of the Central Board of Film Censor, if they provide these services in their capacity, supply excludes. Further, point number C, a chairperson or member or a director in a body established by central government, state government or local authority and who is not deemed as an employee before the commencement of this class, like the members of Union Public Service Commission and so on. If they provide the service in their capacity, though they may not be employee of the government, in spite of that they are not liable for GST, specifically excluded from the scope of the GST. Further, my dear friends, point number 4 of negative list, services of funeral, burial or crematorium mortuary services, including transportation of deceased, then not attract GST. Further, sale of land and subject to class B of paragraph 5 of the schedule 2, sale of building. See here, sale of land, here building which is already completed the construction, then we are selling the property, it is immovable nature which is not attract the GST unless you receive the advance before obtaining completion certificate or before ready to occupy among the two, whichever is earlier, within that period, if it have been obtained any advance, then in that case it is attract GST under the construction supply of services. Further, my dear friends, referring to you here, point number 6, actionable claims other than lottery betting and gambling cases. Example, right to recover insurance money, claim for arrears of rent, unsecured debentures, unsecured loans, bills of exchange, promissory note, bank guarantee, fixed deposit receipts, etc. is called as actionable claims, which is not attached with GST. But other than the lottery betting gambling, that means lottery betting gambling is, the term supply includes lottery betting gambling, it is not excluded from the scope of supply. Further, point number 7 of negative list, namely schedule 3, supply of goods from non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory means outside India, from outside India to outside India, without such goods entering into India, that is not going to attract the GST in India. With effect from 1st October 2019, there is an amendment here so as to exempt services provided by an intermediary when location of both supplier and recipient of the goods is outside the taxable territory. Repeating, services provided by an intermediary when location of both supplier and recipient of goods is outside the taxable territory. Look here, my dear friends. In India, Mr. C is an intermediary. Here, on behalf of A Incorporation of USA, C of Chennai intermediary received the order from S Incorporation Singapore buyer, and the goods has been supplied directly from A Incorporation USA to S Incorporation of Singapore upon the intimating of orders by Mr. C, for which C is getting some commission, which is exempted in the hands of Mr. C. One example is here. Mr. Jumbi, a supplier registered in Hyderabad, Telangana, procures the goods from China and directly supplies the same to a customer in US with reference to the provisions of the GST law. Examine whether the said activity of supply of goods by Mr. Jumbi is to customers in US is taxable under the GST. If yes, determine the place of supply in the given case. From where to where the goods are moving. Jumbi, no doubt, is a supplier of registered person in Hyderabad, namely Telangana, where procure the goods from China. Procure the goods from China, directly requested to China, supply the goods to the buyer US. So the goods are moving from China to US. In that case, without touching Indian entry, in that case, the particular whatever consideration received by Mr. Jumbi for doing so is outside the scope of the GST. It covered under Schedule 3, point number 7. It is treated as supply excludes. Supply excludes supply of goods from a place in non-taxable territory to another place of non-taxable territory whether the goods are entering into India, which is covered under Schedule 3, therefore not attract GST in India. Got the clarity, my dear friends? Supply of goods from non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory without such goods are entering into India. In that case, it is applicable. Further, my dear friends, this is a supply of services by Mr. C, commission agent. Further, simple to say, my dear sir, it is simple to say. I will tell you with example. Furthermore, don't worry at all. Point number 7, schedule 3. For example, Mrs. ABC Incorporation, Mexico, here Mr. Bharat, Indian, in India. He receives for getting buyers of Canada. Mexico paying the commission to Bharat in India to get the orders. Then goods directly supplied to this fellow after getting the orders, for which commission paid to Bharat by ABC Incorporation, because he only get the order to supply the goods. Now the goods moving directly from Mexico to Canada without touching in India. Whatever commission he earns, that is qualify from exempt. Further, my dear friends, very simple. Furthermore points. Point number 8A. Point number 8A. If you refer here, supply of warehouse goods to any person before clearances for home consumption. Before clearances for home consumption. Meaning what? Import the goods and request the Department of Customs by following the procedure of warehousing. The goods are warehoused. Yet to remove for home consumption. India is my home country. To consume in India, I yet to consume the goods in India. Therefore, the goods has been purchased. A buyer from outside India, from a supplier who is outside India, where in India the person facility to do it, it is also not supply, already covered under schedule point number 7. Point number 8 here is 8A is here is this: import the goods but not cleared for home consumption. India is my home country, not cleared for consuming in India, but I request Department of Customs to warehouse the goods. The goods are now warehoused. During the tenure of warehousing period, I supplied those goods to somebody else, which is not a supply. Supply excludes it is. Example: X Limited supplied warehoused goods to Y for consideration before clearances for home consumption. Transaction between X Limited and Y Limited is not a supply. Repeating my dear friends, repeating my dear sir, transaction between X Limited and Y Limited not supply, because these goods are warehoused after importation before clearing for home consumption. During the tenure of warehousing, that importer supplied that goods to somebody else, which is not a supply, not liable to pay GST. The buyer of that goods, when he submit the documents to clear the goods from the warehouse, that time is liable to pay import duty, which includes IGST, which is advanced concept, which we will discuss under the customs subsequently. For the CA IPCC is considered customs not available at your syllabus. Relax, coolly leave it. Further, my dear friends, 8B, supply of goods by the consignee to any person by endorsement of documents of title to the goods after the goods have been dispatched from the port of origin located outside India but before clearances for home consumption, namely high seas sales. See, here India, it is the goods are coming from other country, it is at, let us say, here high seas. Here high seas sale. The importer, before the goods reaches to Indian port, before warehouse, before clearing for home consumption, that goods at high seas sold to some new person. Look here, X Limited supplied the goods to Y Limited for consideration by endorsement of documents of title to the goods. Transaction between X and Y Limited is not a supply. Goods has been procured from high seas, where the importer supplied the documents of title and the goods even before the goods reaches to Indian port, or even before clearing for home consumption, before clearing for warehousing. That imported goods has been sold to somebody else, which is not a supply. Supply excludes this transaction. So, my dear friends, we have been covered so far all the 8 points which are there in Schedule 3, which talks about supply excludes, namely called as, it is negative list. A quick recapitulation on it are as follows, my dear friends. A quick recapitulation of this, all the 8 points. Point number 1, supply of services by employee to an employee in the to an employer. Supply of services by an employee to his employer in the course or in relation to his employment. Supply excludes. Point number 2, fee payable to a court or tribunal, including consumer dispute redressal commission, is not a supply. Point number 3, here the sale of land, building, not a supply. 4, services provided to a deceased person, in relation to a deceased person, not a supply. Actionable claims, not a supply, except lottery, betting, gambling. Are getting my dear friends the points? Furthermore, referring, fee payable to a court or tribunal, not a supply. 6 points. 7, supply of goods from non-taxable territory to non-taxable territory, not a supply, without that goods touching into India. Point number 8, imported goods are warehoused. During the tenure of warehousing, the goods has been sold without clearing for home consumption, not a supply. Point number 8 in that B, supply of goods by the consignee to any person by endorsement of documents of title. Simple, importer imported the goods before clearing for home consumption or warehousing. That goods has been sold, title on those goods has been transferred to another person, which is not a supply. These are all 8 points. Supply excludes, outside the scope of the GST. since covered under Schedule 3. Got the clarity? At this point of time, I am concluding the topic called as Supply Excludes Schedule 3 transactions. I concluded. Thank you, my dear friends. See you in the next class.